September 13, 2005. A city landfill in Lubbock, Texas. A brand new suitcase, a body folded inside. No ID, no clothes, no name. Every tag ripped out, every label removed, except one. By the end of this story, you'll know how a barcode smaller than a fingernail led police to a killer, and to a second victim who had been missing for 29 months. On a Tuesday morning in mid-September, a sanitation worker is making his rounds at the Lubbock City landfill. It is a sprawling site, acres of compacted waste baking under the West Texas sun. He is walking through a section where garbage is dropped off before being crushed into the main body of the dump when something catches his eye. Sitting on top of one of the piles, clearly visible against the surrounding trash, is a black suitcase. It is not the kind of thing you would expect to see here. The suitcase looks new, almost unused. There is grime on the outside from whatever it has been sitting in, but the shell is intact, the zippers are clean, and there is no sign of the wear and tear that comes from years of travel. Something about this compels the worker to walk over. He reaches down and begins to unzip the main compartment. It is heavy. There is something large inside. For a split second, the worker thinks it might be a mannequin, someone's idea of a sick joke. It is not a mannequin. Inside the suitcase, folded into the fetal position, is the body of a young woman. She is completely unclothed. She has no identification of any kind. No wallet, no phone, no clothes. Nothing to tell anyone who she is or how she ended up here. Her body shows obvious signs of a violent attack. Bruises, swelling, marks around her neck. Lubbock police arrive at the scene within the hour. They know immediately that this is going to be a difficult case. The victim has no ID. The crime did not happen here. The landfill is a dump site, not a murder scene. Whatever evidence might exist beyond the suitcase itself is buried somewhere in a mountain of garbage that stretches across an area the size of several football fields and is years deep. Even if something is out there, the chances of finding it, and finding it uncontaminated, are close to zero. The body and the suitcase are taken for further analysis, and what the medical examiner finds during the autopsy is the kind of thing that stays with investigators for the rest of their careers. The young woman has at least 50 blunt force injuries across her head, body, and limbs. Ligature strangulation marks circle her neck. There are bruises and multiple injuries to her inner thighs and groin, telltale signs of a violent sexual assault. She is between 5 and 10 weeks pregnant. But the worst detail is this: the medical examiner cannot determine which specific injury killed her. The combination of blunt force trauma and asphyxiation makes it impossible to isolate a single cause of death. The most likely scenario, the examiner says, is positional asphyxia. In other words, she was still alive when she was put into that suitcase. The suitcase was zipped shut. Her body was compressed so tightly that she could not expand her lungs to breathe. She suffocated inside the bag, somewhere between the moment it was closed and the moment it was found at the landfill. Based on the condition of the body, this happened within the last 24 to 48 hours. Someone beat this woman. Someone sexually assaulted her. Someone folded her into a suitcase while she was still breathing, and someone threw that suitcase into a dumpster and walked away. But it is also during the autopsy that police get their first real lead. The woman has a tattoo on her ankle. One word: Summer. It turns out to be her name. When investigators run her fingerprints through the motor vehicle database, they get a match. Summer Baldwin, 29 years old, born in Tacoma, Washington in August of 1976. She grew up in Roswell, New Mexico, and by all accounts was a warm and joyful person. She made friends easily. She had a contagious laugh, the kind that would get an entire room going. She was interested in cosmetology and had gone to school for it. She had a young son whom she loved deeply and was raising on her own. She had an aunt in the Lubbock area named Terry, who was like a second mother to her. Her own mother, Yuva Roback, lived back in Washington. They kept in regular contact, even though Yuva admitted she did not know everything about her daughter's life in Texas. What Yuva did not know, or perhaps chose not to focus on, was that Summer had been struggling with drug addiction and was involved in sex work at the time of her death. She had spent a brief time in jail related to her addiction. She was also serving as a witness in a federal counterfeiting case, which had brought her to the attention of the FBI. The media at the time repeated these details, drugs, sex work, over and over, and never dug any deeper into who Summer actually was. Her life was reduced to 2 facts about her circumstances, as if those facts were the sum of her existence. They were not. Summer Baldwin was someone's daughter, someone's mother, someone who laughed first and laughed loudest and made everyone around her feel a little lighter. She was just a really happy person, her mother said, and she deserved to live. With Summer identified, investigators turned to the only witness they can find. A woman named Margie Estrada, a friend of Summer's, tells police that she ran into Summer by chance on the night of Sunday, September 11th, 2 days before the body was found. It was late, somewhere between 11:30 and midnight. Margie was walking out of a 7-Eleven at the intersection of Avenue Q and 8th Street in downtown Lubbock when she spotted Summer sitting in the passenger seat of a vehicle. Summer got out briefly to talk to Margie. She said the man in the truck was a client. She said they had been together using drugs. She did not have any visible bruises or injuries at the time. The conversation was short. Summer got back into the vehicle and Margie never saw her again. Margie did not get a great look at the man behind the wheel, but she remembered a few things. He was young, he had short hair, a military-style cut. He appeared to be decent-looking, Hispanic or white. And the vehicle, that she remembered clearly. It was a red pickup truck, new, a 4-door model. This narrowed the timeline significantly. Summer was alive and apparently unharmed late on the night of September 11th. Her body was found at the landfill on the morning of September 13th. Whatever happened to her happened in that window, and whoever was driving that red truck was almost certainly the last person to see her alive. But a red pickup truck in Texas is not exactly a rare sight. Margie had not gotten a license plate. She could not identify the driver with certainty. Police needed something more concrete. Think about what investigators have at this point. A victim with 50 injuries, sexually assaulted, stuffed into a suitcase alive, found at a landfill. A witness who saw her 2 nights earlier getting into a red truck with a young man with short hair. And a suitcase that looked brand new, the only piece of physical evidence they have from the crime. They turned to the suitcase, and what they found inside it would break the entire case open. Before we get to that, if this story has you hooked, hit subscribe. Because what came out of that suitcase was not what anyone expected. When investigators first examined the bag, they were hoping for the obvious. Fingerprints, DNA, hair from the killer, something physical that could be run through a database. But it became clear early on that this was not going to happen. Whoever had done this had been careful. All of the DNA, blood, and other biological evidence found inside the suitcase belonged to Summer Baldwin. The killer had taken steps to cover his tracks. He had also tried to remove every identifying mark from the bag. The tags were torn out. The brand inserts were gone. The registration card had been ripped away. It looked like the kind of thing someone does when they know that a suitcase can be traced back to a store, and a store can be traced back to a buyer. But the suitcase was clean on the inside in a way that confirmed what both the sanitation worker and the detectives already suspected. This bag was new, almost unused. There was still tissue paper stuffed into some of the smaller compartments, the kind you find when you first buy a piece of luggage. And then, a detective noticed something. Tucked into one of the creases of the inner lining, almost invisible unless you were looking for it, was a small tag. On it was a UPC code, 12 numbers, a barcode smaller than a fingernail. The killer had ripped out everything he could see. He missed this one. Now, most people do not think much about UPC codes. You see them every day at the checkout counter. But a universal product code does far more than tell a scanner how much something costs. That string of 12 numbers contains information about the manufacturer, the product type, the size, the weight, the facility where it was produced. Every product gets its own unique code, and every time that code is scanned at a register, it creates a record of where it was sold, when it was sold, and, in many cases, how it was paid for. Police took the UPC and began reaching out to local retailers. It did not take long. Only one store in the Lubbock area carried this particular model of suitcase, a Protégé brand bag sold exclusively at Walmart. Detectives went to the nearest Walmart, the one closest to the 7-Eleven where Margie had last seen Summer, and pulled the sales records. They cross-referenced every purchase of this specific suitcase model between the night of September 11th and the morning of September 13th. 2 people had bought this suitcase during that window. The first buyer was an older woman. She needed the bag for a family vacation. She was ruled out immediately. The second purchase had been made at 3:30 in the morning on September 12th. When detectives pulled the surveillance footage for that transaction, it gave them chills. The footage was grainy, but even so, the man in the video matched the basic description Margie Estrada had given. Young, short hair, calm. He strolled through the store as if he knew exactly what he was looking for. He picked up the suitcase. And then he picked up one other item, a pack of latex gloves. A suitcase and latex gloves, purchased at 3:30 in the morning, hours after Summer was last seen alive. Investigators followed the man on the store's exterior cameras as he walked out of the Walmart and into the parking lot. He walked straight to a vehicle, got inside, and drove away. The vehicle was a red pickup truck, new, 4 doors, every detail matched. But the evidence did not stop there. The pack of latex gloves had been paid for with a debit card. Police subpoenaed the financial records attached to the card and got the name of the account holder. And when they saw that name, the temperature in the room changed. They recognized it. Not from this case, from another one. The name on the debit card was Rosendo Rodriguez. On the morning of May 4th, 2004, 16 months before Summer Baldwin's body was found at the Lubbock City landfill, a woman named Catherine Rogers walked into her 16-year-old daughter's bedroom to wake her up for school. It was about 7 in the morning, a normal Tuesday. Catherine expected to find Joanna still sleeping. The girl had worked a late shift at a local sandwich shop the night before and had come home just before 12:30. She told her parents she loved them, hugged and kissed them goodnight, and went to her room. But when Catherine opened the door, Joanna was gone. Not gone as in she had left early for school, gone as in vanished. Joanna's wallet was still there, her car keys, her cell phone, her favorite coat. She had not taken any of her things. The family's 2 dogs had not barked during the night. Catherine's husband, Joe Bill, said he had heard a noise around 3:30 in the morning, something outside. But when he looked, he saw nothing and assumed the dogs had knocked over a trash can. Police were called. Their initial assumption was that Joanna was acting out, a teenager who had snuck out. But when they checked with every one of her friends and confirmed that no one had seen or heard from her, the tone changed quickly. A massive search was launched across the Lubbock area. Hundreds of volunteers, flyers on every storefront, appeals on the nightly news. Weeks passed, then months. Joanna never came home. Given her age and the circumstances, no belongings taken, no sign of forced entry, no contact with anyone, police concluded that foul play was likely involved. They looked first at Joanna's boyfriend, another teenager. He was ruled out. Then investigators discovered something that made the case far more complicated. Joanna had been living something of a secret life online. In her spare time, she was spending hours in chat rooms, communicating with older men. Her chat history showed contact with over 100 people. One of those people was a 25-year-old man named Rosendo Rodriguez. All of the men on that list were considered suspects. But working through over 100 screen names, figuring out real identities, tracking down locations, attempting interviews, was painstakingly slow. Most of them were not local. Most were not forthcoming about why they had been talking to a 16-year-old girl on the internet. Rodriguez's name had come up early in the process, but when police tried to contact him, he was away for military training. There were no other red flags in his history. His name drifted to the bottom of the list. 16 months later, that name surfaced on a debit card in a Walmart in Lubbock at 3:30 in the morning. Rosendo Rodriguez III was born on March 26, 1980. He grew up in Wichita Falls, Texas. His father was a local attorney. By outward appearances, Rosendo had a promising future. He was a graduate of Texas Tech University. He had joined the United States Marine Corps Reserve. He had no criminal record. He was clean-cut, good-looking, well-spoken. People who knew him said he could have become anything he wanted. What no one knew, or at least what no one was willing to say out loud, was that Rosendo Rodriguez had a history of violence against women that stretched back years. During his eventual trial, 5 women, including his high school girlfriend, would testify that he had raped or sexually assaulted them. His weekend Marine Reserve training included, among other things, combat fighting and martial arts instruction. He knew how to hurt people efficiently, and he knew how to present a calm, controlled exterior while doing it. On the weekend of September 9th through 12th, 2005, Rodriguez was in Lubbock for reserve training. His unit was staying at a Holiday Inn on the outskirts of town. But Rodriguez did not stay with them. He checked himself into a completely different Holiday Inn, one located several miles away, right across the street from the 7-Eleven where Margie Estrada had seen Summer Baldwin on the night of September 11th. He checked in under a different name, Thomas Rodriguez. He arrived in a new red 4-door pickup truck rented from Enterprise. On the evening of September 11th, Rodriguez encountered Summer Baldwin. According to his later statements to police, they met, went back to his hotel room, and had what he claimed was a consensual sexual encounter. He said that afterwards, Summer pulled out a crack pipe and started smoking in his room. He said he took the drugs away from her. He said she then pulled out a small folding knife and came at him. He said he put her in a headlock to restrain her. He said they fell to the floor. He said she went limp. He said it was self-defense. None of this matched the evidence. Summer Baldwin had at least 50 blunt force injuries. She had ligature strangulation marks. She had injuries consistent with violent sexual assault. She had no cuts on her body, and neither did Rodriguez. There was no knife found at the scene. The medical examiner's findings were consistent with a prolonged, one-sided beating followed by strangulation, not a struggle over a weapon. And the most damning detail of all, Summer was likely still alive when Rodriguez folded her into that suitcase, zipped it shut, and threw it in a dumpster. After the killing, Rodriguez did not panic, at least not in any way that looked like panic. According to evidence presented at trial, he ate a large meal, watched a movie, and took a nap in the hotel room. Then, at 3:30 in the morning, he drove to Walmart. He walked calmly through the aisles, selected a suitcase and a pack of latex gloves, paid with his debit card, and drove back to the hotel. He put Summer's body in the suitcase, cleaned what he could see in the room, and disposed of the bag in a dumpster. Then he drove back to San Antonio. Once home, he went online. He searched for news stories about Summer Baldwin's death. He searched for his own name on local news sites. And then he searched online singles sites for young women. Think about that sequence. A woman is dead in a dumpster in a suitcase he bought 3 hours ago. He is at home searching the internet to see if anyone has connected him to it, and simultaneously browsing for his next potential victim. When Lubbock police showed up at Rodriguez's home in San Antonio with a search warrant on September 15th, he did not ask why he was being taken in. He did not seem surprised. During questioning, he told his version of events, the self-defense story. Detectives did not believe a word of it, but they had more than enough physical evidence to prove their case. In his home, they recovered the exact shirt he was wearing in the Walmart surveillance footage. On his computer, they found the searches for Baldwin, for his own name, for news coverage of the case. At the Holiday Inn back in Lubbock, the room Rodriguez had stayed in still had not been cleaned. What investigators found inside was beyond anything they expected. There was dried blood on the carpet next to the bed farthest from the door, blood spatter on the box springs and mattress. In a garbage can down the hall, police found a Walmart bag containing used latex gloves, the exact brand purchased in the surveillance video, and a protégé suitcase registration card. A used condom was also found in the room. The blood was matched to Summer Baldwin. The DNA on the outside of the latex gloves was matched to Summer. The DNA on the inside of the gloves was matched to Rosendo Rodriguez. The hotel room told the full story. This was the crime scene. It had been sitting there, uncleaned, for 3 days. Every piece of evidence Rodriguez thought he had disposed of, or thought he had cleaned, was still there. The suitcase tag he ripped out was in the hallway trash. The gloves he wore were in the hallway trash. The blood he tried to wipe away had soaked into the carpet and the mattress. He had removed every visible label from the suitcase. He had worn gloves. He had disposed of the body in a landfill where it was supposed to be crushed and buried forever. He had done everything he could think of to make this disappear. But he missed a UPC tag tucked into a crease in the lining. 12 numbers. And those 12 numbers led to Walmart, which led to the surveillance footage, which led to the debit card, which led to his name, which led to the hotel room, which led to the blood, the gloves, the DNA, and the registration card for the suitcase he thought he had made untraceable. One tag, one barcode, one crease he did not check. But the investigation was not over, because now police had a second question. If Rosendo Rodriguez killed Summer Baldwin in September 2005, and his name had already appeared on the list of men who were communicating online with Joanna Rogers before she vanished in May 2004, then what had he done to Joanna? Cell phone records confirmed that Rodriguez had called Joanna's home phone twice on the morning she disappeared. The first call was at 3:13 a.m. It lasted 10 minutes. The second was 20 minutes later, at 3:33 a.m. It lasted 1 minute. Rodriguez lived approximately 20 minutes from the Rogers home. Joe Bill Rogers had heard a noise outside at 3:30 a.m. The timeline fit perfectly. But phone records and chat logs alone were not enough to build a murder case, especially without a body. Police needed Rodriguez to tell them what he had done with Joanna. So, prosecutors made a deal with the devil. Because Summer was pregnant at the time of her death, the case qualified as capital murder under Texas law. Rodriguez was eligible for the death penalty. Prosecutors offered him a way out. If he told them what he had done with Joanna Rogers and pleaded guilty to both murders, they would recommend a life sentence instead of death. Investigators agonized over this decision. They did not want to make it, but they spoke to both families. Summer's mother Uva and Joanna's parents Catherine and Joe Bill, and both agreed. If this was the only way to find Joanna, they were willing to accept it. Rodriguez took the deal. He told detectives that on the morning of May 4, 2004, he had arranged to meet Joanna. He picked her up from the alley behind her house. He said they had a consensual sexual encounter in his truck. He said that afterwards, Joanna revealed her true age and demanded money, threatening to blackmail him. He said he panicked and choked her to death, the exact same way he claimed he killed Summer. Self-defense, an accident, every detail nearly identical to the story he told about Summer Baldwin. Then he told them what he did with her body. He went back to where he was staying. He found a suitcase. He put Joanna inside. He threw the suitcase in a dumpster. The same method, the same disposal, 16 months apart. Rodriguez told investigators which dumpster he had used. Police went to the Lubbock City landfill. Workers were able to give them a rough approximation of where that dumpster's contents would have been deposited. But rough meant an area the size of several football fields, buried under 29 months of accumulated garbage. Hundreds of volunteers came out into the scorching Texas heat and began digging. They dug through mountains of rotting trash, day after day, in conditions that were dangerous and nauseating. For weeks, they found nothing. And then, in October of 2006, 29 months after Joanna Rogers was first reported missing, they found it. A suitcase. Inside were Joanna's remains. Her body had mummified in the dry Texas landfill. It was her. After more than 2 years of searching, of hoping, of not knowing, Catherine and Joe Bill Rogers finally had their daughter back. They could give her a proper burial. They could stop wondering. It was one of the most emotional moments in Lubbock law enforcement history. But Rosendo Rodriguez was not finished being Rosendo Rodriguez. On the day he was supposed to enter his guilty plea, the deal that would save his life, he walked into the courtroom and backed out. He claimed he had no idea why he was there. He said he had not done anything wrong. He said he could not understand what his attorney was telling him. The deal was dead. And with it, so was Rodriguez's protection from the death penalty. Prosecutors withdrew their offer and began preparing for trial. There was one frustration. Because Rodriguez's confession about Joanna had been part of the plea agreement, nothing he said about her could be used in court. The trial would proceed on Summer Baldwin's case alone. But the evidence was overwhelming. In 2008, Rosendo Rodriguez was convicted of capital murder. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. During the punishment phase, prosecutors presented evidence of Rodriguez's pattern of violence. 5 women testified that he had raped or assaulted them. His defense team presented testimony about his abusive, alcoholic father. Family members said he could have become president. The jury sentenced him to death. Rodriguez spent nearly a decade fighting his sentence. Appeal after appeal was denied. On the evening of March 27, 2018, one day after his 38th birthday, the United States Supreme Court denied his final appeal. Rosendo Rodriguez was executed by lethal injection at the Huntsville unit in Texas. His final statement lasted 7 minutes. He never apologized. He never acknowledged what he had done to Summer Baldwin or Joanna Rogers. Instead, he called for an investigation into the Lubbock County District Attorney. He asked people to boycott Texas businesses until the state abolished the death penalty. He said the state might have his body, but not his soul. Joanna's father, Joe Bill Rogers, watched through the glass. Afterwards, he told reporters that an apology would not have made a bit of difference. He just cared about himself, Joe Bill said. Just a sociopath. Summer Baldwin's mother, Yuva Roback, was there too. She had lost her only child and her unborn grandchild to this man. He went to his maker, Yuva said, and he has got his justice now. Rosendo Rodriguez was pronounced dead at 6:46 p.m. He was 38 years old. 2 women, 2 suitcases, the same landfill, 16 months apart. One was a 29-year-old mother who laughed louder than anyone in the room. The other was a 16-year-old girl who was kissed goodnight by her parents and was gone by morning. The man who killed them was educated, good-looking, and had no criminal record. He was a Marine reservist. He was the son of an attorney. He could walk into a Walmart at 3:30 in the morning, buy a suitcase and latex gloves, pay with his own debit card, and drive away as if nothing in the world was wrong. He thought he had covered everything. He ripped out every tag, every label, every insert from that suitcase. He wore gloves. He dumped the body in a landfill where it was supposed to disappear forever. But in a crease in the lining, tucked so deep that you would have to know exactly where to look, there was a tag with 12 numbers on it, a UPC code. And those 12 numbers led police to a store, to a surveillance camera, to a debit card, to a name, to a hotel room still covered in blood, and, eventually, to a 16-year-old girl buried under 2 years of garbage. Summer's mother said it best. She was just a really happy person, and she deserved to live. If this case stays with you, it is probably because of how close it came to going unsolved, how easily that tag could have been missed, how easily that suitcase could have been crushed before anyone opened it. Sometimes justice comes down to 12 numbers in a crease that a killer forgot to check. Drop your thoughts in the comments. There is another case where a killer thought he had destroyed every piece of evidence. But the one thing he could not destroy was already in a database, waiting for the technology to catch up. That story is next.